Hey everyone, welcome back to the It's a Mind Game podcast. My name is Jade. I'm a personal trainer and mindset coach specializing in HA and ED recovery and female specific training protocols. Today, I'm so excited to welcome back Claudia, who is an expert nutritionist in HA and ED recovery and is here to give us some 3 knowledge nuggets that are going to improve our recovery experience. So welcome.
So excited to be here again, Jade. It's always a pleasure being in your podcast.
It's always so wonderful, and I always find myself restraining from just leading into a "how are you? Tell me about your life story" chat. And
yeah, let's talk about that.
No,
instead.
we have a focus. We're here to help the ladies, and that is what we need to do. But today we want to dive into, in particular, your 3 non-negotiables for HA recovery, because with all the information out there, everyone's got something to say, which is super helpful in some elements and completely overwhelming in others. And given you have helped so many women recover from HA, fall pregnant, have their babies, and all these wonderful experiences, through all of this, what are your top 3 non-negotiables for HA recovery?
Okay, so my 3 non-negotiables are based on what I've seen in clinical practice over the past 5 years. And that's something that I've noticed over and over again, which is why I really want to talk about these 3 today. The first one is super unsexy, but it's really understanding the root cause of a missing period. Lots of women, they come to me. Yeah, I know, right? It's so unsexy. But I receive daily messages of women saying, my doctor told me that my blood test results are super normal. So I am unsure if I have HA. Other women instead, they come to me and they say, I do have HA. And whenever I look at the blood test results, I quickly notice that there is something else playing in the background. Then I have clients that come to me with HA, but there is also that PCOS component overlapping, or sometimes they do come with an autoimmune disorders or with thyroid issues. So if you are really serious about getting the period back, boosting the fertility, restoring the hormones, feeling vital, and getting out of the HA bubble in the quickest amount of time possible, get to the root cause. Find out exactly what is going on so that you're not going to be working on HA first, then PCOS, then autoimmune, then thyroid. Let's work on all of these together from the get-go. Also because it's very empowering to have a good understanding of what is going on in someone's health. Like if you're feeling tired day in and day out, if you can't really get up in the morning, if you're constantly brain fogged, if your attention span is less than 10 seconds when completing a task, chances are that maybe it's not only HA, maybe there is something else. So while we're trying to help you to get the period back, how about that we address that? We address the sleep, we address the energy, and we address all the other things that are coming up play. How do you feel about my tip number 1?
I love it. And I feel like my ears pricked up, therefore someone else's ears might have pricked up as well, because you said one, when defining it is actually HA. So first of all, when it comes to defining, working out that we actually have HA is, so I meant to say diagnosing. I lost my word. I was saying diagnosing HA. What is your best method of testing in order to prove you actually have HA versus going, I read the website, I fit the training criteria, the disordered eating criteria. I'm not going to say weight criteria anymore, because I think we've completely debunked that low body weight, low body fat is only HA. It happens in all shapes and sizes. But when you are seeing someone for the first time, what blood work, what tests, what do you want to see so that you can actually be the detective who goes, oh, yes, this is HA, or it is autoimmune, or it is whatever else?
Have we done a podcast about this? About the blood test that needs to be done before discussing HA diagnosis? Because if we didn't, we should.
Yeah, no, I was going to say we've definitely done the HA versus PCOS, knowing the difference. But Yes, let's note this down.
Yeah, I think that I've recorded a couple of episodes on the Recover from HA support group, but definitely I always want to see nutritional deficiencies, especially minerals and vitamins, sex hormones. And when I say sex hormones, is not FSH and estrogen. It's FSH, LH, estrogen, sex hormones binding globulin, testosterone, all the androgens, all the beautiful androgens that comes to play. Thyroid health for sure. Ion studies as well. And then I love to mix in a couple of extra things like EPR and things like that, just to see how if there is any inflammation going on in the body. And then I just leave it at that. So that's enough for me to get started with someone. And then after the first session, I normally identify if there is any reasons to do further testing. I have lots of women also that come to me and they say, I've done a Dutch test, which is incredible, but it's also very expensive. In some countries, it's more than 500 USD. So before spending all your money doing a Dutch test that doesn't give you any diagnosis, because when you do a Dutch test, they don't actually tell you what is going on and how to treat it. They simply give you the results of your blood test. And they make the conclusion so difficult to understand that lots of women need to find a professional to actually understand what is going on within their body. So before doing that, just go for some simple blood tests that in most countries are covered by the medical insurance or by the medical system. And if you don't have a great insurance, you can still have some basic tests done on your own privately for a much cheaper price than the Dutch test. So that's definitely a place where I would like to start.
Yeah, and just a big thing that popped up as you were describing what you look for in blood work is if you compare that to the stereotypical GP, where they just look at FSH, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, and then they go, that's enough evidence to go, you're this, you're this, you're this, and compare that to the list of things you're observing. You can't even compare the pair. They're absolutely apples and oranges. And no wonder that puts you in a position to better identify root causes, because you're actually looking at a holistic approach to the overall body function versus just those hormones.
Yeah, but it's not even that. Like sometimes we do have doctors that they test FSH, LH, and estrogen, and they tell a woman everything is fine, your blood tests are looking okay, and the LH is non-detectable, and the estrogen level is below 50. So I'm wondering sometimes, what do they mean by fine? And then I had this beautiful client that she started working with us actually in March. And from the very beginning, I strongly advised her to get her thyroid checked. And she kept on saying, but I checked my TSH, it's looking fine. I've been checking it for so many years, everything is looking fine. And she was losing hair, but she was losing hair in a way that is different on how, compared to how women with HA lose hair, because women with low level of estrogen, they tend to lose hair in this area, in this, how do you call, well, I cannot remember the name of it, but when you have thyroid conditions, you start losing hair everywhere. And you start noticing them in your pillow when you wake up in the morning. So lo and behold, she went to check her TPO antibodies and came out that she was suffering from Hashimoto, which is an autoimmune condition that highly impacted the production of sex hormones and highly impacted the general well-being of a person. And sometimes HA can also trigger this type of immune conditions, but it's still something that needs to be addressed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for addressing that, and super important, even on the systematic front. And like the symptoms, like that's really interesting about the hair, because I actually didn't know that myself. I know hair loss happens in HA, but the way it happens is actually relative to the condition that's going on. So that's really helpful. Thank you. Non-negotiable number 2. What is it?
This is something that I'm gonna share it because I've been thinking
is it
about
sexier?
It's very sexy. It's sexy for you specifically, and that's why when the women decide to join the period comeback protocol, I get really excited, because then I know they're gonna get the best bang for their buck, because everything that I'm gonna discuss today, it's inside the period comeback protocol. So you don't have to go out and do it on your own. You don't have to Google the answer. You can just do it with us, because the second one is to address the emotional and psychological component of why you're not feeling well, why you have lost the period in the first place. And that's where you shine. Jade, because you do an amazing work with the group calls or the one-on-ones to talk about mindset. But if a woman come to us and hasn't had a period for 10 years, there is an emotional baggage. There is a psychological baggage, and maybe the loss of the period was caused by trauma, by stress, so that needs to be addressed. Maybe there is a level of shame that needs to be discussed. Maybe there are behaviors around food and training that that specific woman is not even aware of, or maybe there is the feeling of guilt. I've been doing this to myself, or loneliness. I've been stuck with this on my own for the longest time, and I don't know who to talk to. So I think that what we do in the Jade community is very powerful, because not only there is you with your help in terms of mindset, but there is also that community where people can actually talk the same language. Doesn't matter where they are in the world, they're all speaking the same language. The language of shame, guilt, and loneliness, combined with the desire of feeling better, feeling once again empowered. That's a word that I keep using today, but I think that it really expresses what I'm trying to say. Do you find that tip number 2 is sexier than tip
I was
number
giggling
1?
in my mind. I'm like, she's right. That is sexy to me. Yeah, absolutely. Because the thing is, we can't make change unless we know why we're so resistant to the change in the first place. Because if you think about it from a super simplified, logical perspective, you've got an issue, which is no period. You've got a goal of getting a period, having a baby. If there wasn't baggage, it would just be, oh, well, if I do XYZ things, and then that'll give me my period, and then I can try and fall pregnant naturally. It should be a seamless experience, right? I know what the problem is. I know how to fix it. I'll just do it. But it's not that simple. And the reason it's not that simple is because we've got past experiences that we hold on to. We've got stories that we've been telling ourselves for the longest time that perhaps we don't even know they're there anymore because they're so deep in the subconscious. And it's just a repeat of all these thoughts and stories that makes us feel like change isn't possible, because then we'd be under threat. Then people would judge us. Then people would shame us. Then people might think we've let go, or that we're silly, or all of this other stuff comes in. So it really is essential to get into the nitty gritty of what's the cause of the behavior, rather than just you need to change the behavior. And it's not always necessary a super deep dive into your past, because I think sometimes that can be really scary. Is like, hey, I've got a history and I don't want to dig it up. Like, I've left it in the past. That's completely okay. You don't need to, but it's often just working out the way I like to see it is like, you've got the balloon of the behavior and you might have a few strings, and we just want to trim the strings so that it's just the good stuff. And then you can elevate and move on and feel empowered. But if you're going into this experience simply going, I must change, you might do it for 24, 48, 72 hours, and then you'll get a whiplash effect, because you haven't reviewed your value systems. You haven't reviewed why you want. You haven't reviewed why you feel shackled by your own mind. And as you beautifully said, that's one of the great things about being in the HA protocol or being in the community, is that you've got the pillars to succeeding in your recovery. You've got the nutritional support, you've got the mindset support, you've got the community support, you've got the training support, and you're never left feeling like you're the crazy lady who thinks this and no one else does.
I'm so excited about the place that we have created for women. Anyway, that's beside the point. But I think that I should connect with tip number 3, because
Let's go.
It's gonna beautifully support what you just shared. And I think that tip number 3 is about understanding how to support your hormones, meaning that there is no cookie cutter scenario. Like, supporting our hormones, it's very individual to the person. So I wish that it was enough for women to go out there, eat the 2,500 calories and sit in the couch, and then automatically they would get the period back and get pregnant. Most of the time, it doesn't work that way. In some scenario, it does. Absolutely. I've seen plenty of women recovering just by eating more and training less. But based on my experience and based on all the women that I've attracted in the past few years, there is so much more than that. So really understanding how to support your own lifestyle, it's very important. And as you just said, it's first of all, understanding what's going on, what's brewing in the background, where are your stressors coming from, what are your fears, how are you addressing them? Because if you keep eating more and exercising less, and you start gaining weight and you start getting uncomfortable, and you don't address the root cause that for some women may be stress and anxiety, then you're not going to be able to get your period back. I'm sorry, but that's the reality of it. And then if we talk about food, 2,500 calories, we have already covered this in one of our other podcasts. For some women, it's not enough. For some women, it could be too much. For some women, it's the right number, but then they eat at the wrong time or the wrong foods that don't support the fertility journey. Maybe they help them to get the period back, but don't support the fertility. And then training. Don't let me even get started on training. For some women, three Pilates class a week could be too much. For other women, a marathon a week is okay. So it's very individualized. And we need to come to terms with the fact that we are all beautifully unique from that point of view. The guidelines are very similar, but that's why we work with a very customized approach. And that's what you and I do most of the time. We start women with one-on-one sessions because we really want to understand the background, back history, what's going on. Once again, identify the root cause. So then we can set these women in a path of healing that we know that is going to be successful, instead of throwing the proverbial spaghetti on the walls.
Yeah, and I think, because, you know, there's certain media sources that a lot of us go to when in HA recovery, and it can give the perception that you can eat your way to getting your period back. Like, that's pretty much all you got to do, rest and eat more. And again, like, there is context to it. Like, yes, it can absolutely be the solution, but it isn't always the solution. And not knowing what you need to be looking for can make your journey and process so much longer than it needs to be, and sometimes emotionally more painful, because if you feel like the only step you need to take is eat more and you're doing that, and then it doesn't work, 12 months later you're still in the same spot, that's really disheartening and upsetting, and it breaks more trust that you might have already lost with being misled by health and fitness in the first place. And it can be quite a sad journey, where actually having all that information readily available to you so you can actually make the changes that are relevant to your personal circumstance are so much more empowering. Because back to the spaghetti on the wall, you're not just going, oh, this should work, hoping for the best, holding your breath, only to have an outcome that's less than desirable, purely because you don't have the tools to better troubleshoot your situation.
Well, just as an example, I received a DM yesterday from a woman that she described herself as being overweight. And she also told me that she's training daily and she doesn't understand why her period hasn't come back in the past couple of years. And that's, for example, someone that thinks that she's doing enough to get her period back, but she's quite far away from it. And also, if I talk about my personal scenario, the first time that I lost my period, and we're talking about many moons ago, I didn't even make a connection at that time with exercise and food intake, because I was eating enough. I was eating throughout the day. I was not exercising because I wasn't into exercise at that point of my life, but I just broken up with my boyfriend. And that was such a big stressor for my body. I was so incredibly sad, so incredibly anxious. That was the only time in my life that I had a panic attack as well. Then my body was completely shattered. I was wired as a meerkat. I was living in a stressed response. And my reproductive system was like, oh, we're not going to have a baby right now. Goodbye, see you. And then once I started feeling better and I worked on myself, my period came back 4 months later. Didn't change the food, didn't change the exercise. I just felt better within my skin. Yeah. So address the root cause.
Yeah, no, and it's such an important thing to note that it can come from from various elements of life. And I have to quickly share because it popped up only recently, but our perception of our changes and improvements and how we're getting it all right, let's say, in the moment versus hindsight. So I actually found a food diary I was keeping right about the time I decided to go all in, quote unquote. And when I say all in, my personal all in was still going for a walk every day and doing yoga for an hour, which is step one of perception, because in that moment, I'm like, I'm doing it, I'm all in. But I was still moving strategically and purposefully for 2 hours a day. Like I had to. And I got my period back in the 4 weeks of doing that. But I found the food diary of round about what I was eating when I transitioned from training 4 or 5 times a week to that walking and yoga only. And I couldn't help but giggle at myself, Claudia, because I remember at that point in time, I'm on top of it. I've got my food sorted. I feel good. Everything's going great. And when I look at the food that I was eating to support my 4 or 5 training sessions a week, no wonder my period hadn't come back yet. Because my personal situation, it was very much food and exercise correlated. Like that was me. And then when I reduced the exercise again to the walking and yoga, I'm like, oh, no wonder it happened so quickly. Because when I looked at what I'd been consuming, so it was quite detailed, not in grams and measurements, but I kind of just remember what I was eating. I'm like, oh, you know what? That actual food intake suited walking and yoga. And I could actually see the match, where there was no way, if I was training 4 or 5 sessions a week, that what I was eating was suitable for that at all. But in the moment, I was completely blind. I had no idea. So I remember I've always had this little thing. I wonder if I didn't do my all in, if my period still would have come back in 6 months rather than going my all in and it come back in 4 weeks. It's always kind of like, because you just don't know. We'll never know.
You don't know.
But then after reading that food diary, I was like, you know what? I'm so much more confident now that missing piece was just when I dropped the exercise, it finally matched the food I was giving. And the emotional stress I was on top of, the mental stuff I thought was booming, but in all honesty, it's continued to boom ever since then. So my mindset now versus back then is so much better. But at that point in time, it was the best it had ever been. But just, it's so easy to think you are ticking every box when you're in it, only to get someone else's opinion or to look back at your experience 4 years later for me and go, oh, wow, you were actually missing the mark and you had no idea.
Can I put you on the spot and I ask you a very short fire question?
Yeah, I can't guarantee a short fire answer, but yeah.
But just completely out of your mind without overthinking it. What do you do every single month to make sure that you get regular periods? I mean, you're pregnant now, but it doesn't matter. What do you do? What is your non-negotiables to make sure that you have regular periods?
Oh, my non-negotiables, I still eat within an hour of waking up. And that's even if I get up at 4 a.m. to take a Zoom call at 5.
But what is the biggest thing, like the one thing?
What do you mean? I don't know, because I felt my non-negotiables are still
Exercise.
food, training.
Yeah, not to me is exercise. Like I know, for example, that if I have a second coffee or if I skip a breakfast in the morning because I'm running, I need to rush out of the door. As long as I make sure that I keep my training in check, then I'm gonna get the regular periods. So I've understood in these years that my downfall is exercise. That you know that for some women is the stress, for other women is the exercise, for other women is the food, and for someone else could be the combination of all of it, or maybe something else completely different that we have not mentioned. So I was really curious what it was for you, because I've never asked you this question.
Oh, my training non-negotiable. Yeah. So if you're a regular listener, I cycle sync my training, and I did that from after doing the Dr. Stacey Sims courses, and given the results I've had, I swear by it. For me, I'd match my training to the stages of my cycle that I was in. And because I had the awareness and the education, I would very much know when training was my priority, my period would come maybe 5 days later. I'd go out to a 35-day cycle. But as soon as fertility was my goal, I'd change my training up and my cycle would go down to 30, which is actually best for my body. So it's kind of detailed on the non-negotiables because the cycle's syncing from, but for the most time, when my inflammation's low is when I match my higher intensity sessions, whether it be cardio, heavy lifts. When my inflammation markers are higher, that's when I go more mobility stuff, lower weight, lower repetitions, kind of like wind down. Super intuitive though. Like I have to train field. I have something after I finish training. If I haven't slept all night because I was up with Cosima, like it's a rest day, even if I didn't intend for it to be a rest day. So I'm pretty cutthroat with those things. But they don't feel cutthroat anymore. Yeah. Because it's just how I am. But if I lived that way 6 years ago, I would have felt like the world was punishing me. Like I didn't sleep, so now I can't train. How dare you? When now it's like, hey, you didn't sleep last night. The last thing your body needs now is to go do a 1 hour training session. Go find something else to do. Go do a yoga, go for a walk. Like, but it's not a heavy lift day.
Well, back in April, I had surgery and I couldn't move for a good month after surgery. Back in the days, I would have completely lost my mind. And I actually had a conversation at the beginning of this year with a woman that was having surgery, and she was already planning her training around the surgery. So the kind of movements that she could do, even though she was recovering from a dramatic type of surgery. And I was so thankful that I did all my mindset an HA recovery journey before undergoing the knife, to be honest, because it's so much easier to feel better and to recover quickly and to heal your tissues when you allow yourself to simply rest and recharge when it's the right moment to do so, and to exercise when you have the energy, the capacity, and the willingness to do so.
I love that you actually brought this up because I had quite a reflective moment recently, because when I fell pregnant, I had 8 weeks where I didn't train because I just felt horrible. I didn't have the energy. I felt nauseous, and training just wasn't a priority. My priority was making sure Cosima was well taken care of. My husband was looked after. I was looked after. And at that point, I'd maxed out my capacity. Oh, and obviously like clients and things like that. But like training did not meet my list of important things. It just didn't. And it was very easy for me. I wasn't a BITCH because I wasn't training. I wasn't moping around because I couldn't train. I just went, well, I feel like crap. Here's what's most important to me right now. And unfortunately, like training doesn't make the cut, big whoop. And it was actually a nothing. The bummer was when I started back. And, you know, if you haven't trained for 8 weeks, you don't feel as strong or as flexible. So, you know, I was still a bit bummed out then, but for the most part, that was just my ego. That wasn't my mental state being like, you suck. It was just, oh, you know, you had 8 weeks off. You're growing a human, woman, deal with it. But when I had my my boobs done and I was 24, I think it was 25, 24. Dieting heaps, training heaps. I was told I had to take 2 weeks off movement at the least because I've had surgery. And I was in the gym 3 days later. I had my arms crossed because my boobs felt really heavy. So I'd kind of look like my arms are crossed, but I was actually kind of just holding up because they were swollen. And I sat on one of those 45-degree little bikes and I just pushed. And as soon as I felt my heart rate go up too much because the blood flow is an issue, I'd slow down, wait a minute, and then I'd go again. And then I'd sit on the little leg raise machine, leg extension, I'd do some hammy curls. And yeah, but it could have even been 2 days. I'm probably giving myself credit for 3, but I couldn't not go. And then I just took 8 weeks off. Yeah, I just took 8 weeks off and I'm like, oh, no biggie. What do you do? But that's how far your mindset can come. Because if someone forced me to stay home after that surgery for 8 weeks, oh my God, I would have been in such a prison in my mind. I probably would have cried every day. Like the thought of it makes me really sad.
And I was blissfully reading books.
This time around, I'm just like,
and drinking teas.
Yeah, like it was fine. I had a few naps actually. My naps probably returned my training. But I'm going to shut up now because I get carried away with stories, especially when talking to you. But ladies, I hope you found this podcast informative. The 3 non-negotiables for HA recovery. Is there anything you wanted to add in just before we finish up?
No, I think that we've been pretty thorough today. I'm very happy with what we just shared.
Fantastic. I'm also incredibly happy with it. Ladies, like, subscribe, comment. If you have any questions about the HA recovery protocol and how to fast forward your recovery, send us a message, book in a learn more appointment. We would absolutely love to chat with you. But for now, hope you have a wonderful day and we'll speak to you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.